The Best Practices Handbook was one of the first projects that APREA got underway just after its formation 7 or 8 years ago, and follows the work that two of our sister associations, NAREIT and APREA, have done in Europe and North America over the years. The Best Practices Handbook is an industry-owned document. It was written by a number of our members and has been heavily critiqued and approved by a significant portion of the industry in Asia, and the feedback on the draft handbook when it was first written was taken on board, and it really truly is an industry document that has been adopted by the industry. It covers 5 areas: accounting and financial reporting standards, disclosure, portfolio performance reporting, valuation and corporate governance.
Japanese trend is moving in line with the regulations. In Japan, there is a plan to change the Investment Trust Act in next year. There is some items about the improvement of the governance and disclosure on the agenda for the revision next year.
Well, the Philippines has actually been very active in terms of promoting corporate governance. There is a professional organization called the Institute of Corporate Directors that is actually, whose primary mission is actually to uphold high standards of corporate governance. They basically follow the OECD guidelines on corporate governance, and they have come up with an annual awards of listed companies effectively following the scorecard, the corporate governance scorecard of ICD. And companies like us effectively submit on the basis of that scorecard and are given awards every year. And very recently, to further improve that, they have actually adopted the ASEAN Corporate Governance Index, which is an even more detailed and a more stringent corporate governance standard that is also aligned with the OECD guidelines on corporate governance. So, in fact, they have adopted that now in the Philippines, and listed companies like us will now be subjected to a more stringent standard for corporate governance. The Philippine Stock Exchange has also initiated a similar initiative to effectively encourage listed companies to follow best practices in corporate governance, similar to what happened in Brazil. I think they created what they call the Novo Mercado, which is a different board of companies who have actually reached that higher level of corporate governance. They're trying to adopt something similar to the Philippines, encouraging, I guess, those who have been winners in the past corporate governance awards to effectively graduate into that category. I guess the belief is that this new higher level of standard will also lead to a corporate governance premium for these companies who have adopted all of these good best practices in a meaningful manner.
Well, we ranked 4th, I believe. Today's talk mentioned that we're number 4. I think that's been done by the Asian Corporate Governance Association and CLSA, where we came, I think, number 4. And I think that's very telling on the fact that the government itself and the regulators have put a lot of effort into improving our corporate governance. I think in the early 90s there was a lot of problems with the markets and disclosure issues. We've seen a complete transformation in the last 2 years, really, in the Malaysian markets, where all the publicly listed companies have now looked at governance as an essential part of their structures, because they have to raise capital, and they will not attract that capital unless they can prove to the world that they have a very strong corporate governance framework in place. Having said that, we're now on the accounting standards, we're adopting the FRS systems. It'll be mandatory by 2012, so that's all being accommodated. There's some countries in Asia that haven't adopted them yet, but Malaysia proudly now is already part of that group that actually has adopted FRS practices. And we've been adopting those practices ever since we've listed, although we really didn't have to do it, but we adopted it anyway. And as a result of that, I think we've been ahead of the curve in that respect.
Governance and disclosure trends in India are improving. The sector is evolving. People are trying to follow global trends, but APREA being a global platform, Asia platform, they should take a strong stand and try to standardize a lot of things which are getting involved, and APREA can take a bold step in that. Practices book is very, very important, I feel, because this gives a global picture. It has been standardized kind of a thing, which makes it very handy. We have used best practices book in a lot of places to implement our governance and taking things, moving the company forward. So I feel best practices book to standardize to a large extent and give a global exposure what's going on globally. So that helps a lot.
To me, they mean that there's an opportunity for investors to understand better what those organisations are doing with their investments. It opens up their markets greatly for investments and makes the whole market a lot more transparent for doing business. So best practices ultimately mean better business and greater opportunity for the organisations and the investors to thrive in those markets.
Why I think best practices standard is important for APREA is I think you lift the game as far as improving the expertise of managing companies goes. In APREA, we try our best to improve expertise within the industry by conducting a CREEF program where we teach young asset managers the various techniques of appraising property, valuation, and appraising capital markets. So we think that by doing this, professionals within the industry will be trained to manage their portfolio well. And once you have this general standard being lifted, then of course the company itself would be able to do the right thing for shareholders. And so if you talk about lifting the game, then it's about valuation practices, it's about asset management practices, and it's about astute portfolio management. So once you're able to inculcate that kind of a culture within the organization, then of course the company will be able to do well for shareholders.
We've actually had a framework in place ever since we listed. We initially used the corporate governance rules in Malaysia, the first edition by the Securities Commission. And when APREA started bringing out their best practices awards, we started looking at that as a template as well. We treat it very seriously because we feel that's what drives the value of our fund. Because of our success, I believe, also in having won 2 APREA awards prior to this, it has given our company a tremendous profile regionally, whereas we never had that before. As a result, we've always had this undying passion for improving our corporate governance structure year on year. And I think this is basically what gives us our success in this area, that we have a very accommodating board. We do look at the changes in the regulations, and we annually review and implement the things that we need to implement to make sure that we're up to date with the most recent changes and requirements by the regulators in Malaysia.
What we did was we looked at the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance. We looked at, obviously, the APREA Best Practices Handbook. We looked at the Securities Commission REIT guidelines. And we did a very comprehensive study to understand where were the gaps. And as a result of those gaps identified, we implemented steps to ensure that the best practice are actually incorporated into our system. So this is a process that it is not done overnight, and it is embedded, it is implemented, and it is a process that we go through in order to reach the stage that we are in today.
You know, we have a variety of levels that we use. I think first is at more of a macro or corporate level, we devise what we consider to be the best policies and procedures, you know, kind of taking input from a variety of sources, including our board, our advisors, and everything else. Adopting these policies and then disseminating them company-wide, you know, using also through translations and everything else to make sure that in China, for example, everybody understands our policies. In Japan, everybody understands our policies. And so after we disseminate, then we typically have either personal meetings where we go out and educate the people in terms of what the policies do, as well as teleconferences where we have group calls where we explain to people kind of the impact of the policies and how they operate. And then, really after that, it's within each jurisdiction we have what I'll call my quote-unquote my enforcement arm, which is really the group in that jurisdiction that's responsible for making sure that the governance policies we set at a national or at a global level are really enforced at the local level.
We decided 3 years ago to institute an awards program to give prominence to the importance of the handbook recommendations and to give recognition to companies around the region that are leaders in best practice performance and comply best with the recommendations in our handbook.
Clearly we've seen a number of increase in the applicants, but more than just an increase of the applicants, we've seen the quality of the submissions change. And that change has come through their participation in the association, understanding the spirit of the association, and understanding what best practices truly mean. And what I mean by that is the applicants have actually adopted those best practices into their organization and demonstrated them at the foundation level. And what that has meant is they've moved away from being regulatory requirements that have ticked the box into true best-in-class leaders. And the benefits that those have brought to the organization has become apparent.
These awards basically endorses our commitment as well as acknowledgement of the efforts that we have focused in practicing best practices, and what it does is to help investors understand us a lot better in relation to the higher standard of transparency as well as faster disclosure.
Award means to us a lot. I would give this award a very utmost importance. We have been thriving for this award. APREA is a big platform. We thank APREA for recognizing our work and giving us this award. Thank you.